High School's Environmental Club organized and hosting a 30-minute climate strike this morning.
The club aims to raise awareness of the impacts of climate change in their local and school communities.
Grace Bradley takes us there.
Students in Orono are speaking up and walking out to help raise awareness in their local community about the effects of climate change. Orono High School's Environmental Club hosted their second climate strike Thursday. Students, community activists, and Orono Town Council members spoke. Junior Maureen Tyne and freshman Akuvi Komaja are co-presidents of the Environmental Club, which has garnered about 40 of their peers.
Which is a lot. It's like over 10% of the student population. And we kind of just talk about things that are going on related to climate change and how those may affect us as individuals or as our small community.
The OHS Environmental Club isn't just talk. They are about tangible action. Some speakers highlighted the green changes made at the school, including the success of their composting initiative to diminish food waste, as well as a switch from disposable batteries to rechargeable.
We've diverted about 20,000 pounds of food for the district.
While some may question the legitimacy or effectiveness of a strike during the school day, organizers think it demonstrates the issue at hand perfectly.
Our idea with the strike is it's disruptive, represents what climate change is really doing to our lives. It's disrupting them.
The climate strike is just one event designed by the Environmental Club. Friday, the club has organized the Big Turnoff event to encourage greener ways of getting to school. Grace Bradley, WABI TV5 News, Orono.
And welcome to the team,
Yes.
Grace Bradley. She's been working on the weekend, now a reporter here, so also no longer the new kid in town.
That's very true. Well, I mean, I guess not.
No, now she's got a.
But I mean, she was already in town before I landed
True,
in
you're
town,
still the new
you know?
kid.
So
All right, yeah,
I
that's
guess
true.
A little bit, but so happy to have Grace on this.
She's
time.
great.
So, yeah, she's
absolutely.
amazing.
She keeps us, keeps me. You're already pretty hip, but Grace,
I'm pretty hip.
compared to me.
Oh, I thank you so much.
Yeah,
so
but I
for the
mean,
compliment.
compared to me. Very, very low bar, Sierra.
Well, let's hip hop, bro. Okay, so just.